This is When Science Speaks, a new web series profiling innovative and interesting people working in science and technical fields, from academia to industry to the nonprofit world. We explore how to be a powerhouse advocate for science and your research, how to advance your career in meaningful ways that make you happy, and how to push back on the ongoing assault on science and other related issues of interest happening in the world.
Well, hey everyone. Thanks for joining us on this episode of When Science Speaks. It's Mark Bayer, and I'm really happy to have Kaan with us today for today's episode. First, I want to just tell you that the episode is brought to you by Bayer Strategic Consulting in Washington, D.C., which helps scientists and engineers get funding, gain influence, and build relationships with their most important stakeholders, investors, policymakers, and the public. And it is so fantastic to have Kaan on the show today. I connected with Kaan after being really impressed with his Instagram, which is at slice_of_science, slice of science, where he posts really vivid, creative, and just plain fascinating pictures of the natural world. I have to say that, for the record, Kaan, baboons are my personal favorite, the work that you've done there. And you also highlight the inspiring work of scientists, your colleagues like Olivier, Tom, Noreen, and others. So I would highly recommend you consider joining. I think at this point you're over 10,200 Instagram followers who already eagerly await your next post at slice_of_science. Actually, your Instagram account reflects your goal to, as you put it, show that scientists are people like any other, accessible. Kaan is a research assistant, scientific photographer, and science communicator. He's a PhD candidate working at Richard Benton's lab in Switzerland and interested in the regulation of gene expression in sensory neurons. In addition to his research, Kaan takes scientific photos of his colleagues and shows the beauty of science to the public by simplifying complicated stories, which is not easy. And we're going to have a chance to talk to Kaan about how he approaches that. And social media has helped you build a strong bridge between scientists and society. Kaan is currently a PhD student at the University of Lausanne in life sciences within Richard Benton's group in the Faculty of Biology and Medicine. He earned his master's degree in molecular biology at Boğaziçi University in Turkey and bachelor's in molecular biology and genetics at Istanbul Technology University. Welcome to the show, Kaan.
Hello, Mark. Thanks a lot for the invitation. First of all, it's a great pleasure to be your guest on this show.
Okay.
And I'm very excited to have this dialogue.
Yeah, so am I. And so I want to start by asking you about your research and your focus in your lab and in your current work. And I'd love for you to share information about that. And maybe, as part of that, how you go about explaining your work to someone like me who has no background in your specialty.
Sure. So I'm working in a laboratory that specializes in evolution of chemosensation in fruit flies, so Drosophila melanogaster, but also some other Drosophila species. So our lab is interested in also different insects, but my project is mostly about mesmerizing diversity of the olfactory neurons. So what I mean by that is in olfactory system, both in human and flies, there are so many different type of neurons. And we still don't know how these neurons are differentiated and become so different. One of the main difference between them is the receptor that they are expressing. For example, I'm working with fruit flies, so first thing that comes to my mind is a banana, let's say. Mm-hmm. And we can call it a fruit fly could have some banana neurons that express a receptor that recognize odors of banana. And it will also have an apple neuron, let's say, will express the receptor that recognize apple odors. This is like of course, very simplified version, but the idea is that. So what makes a banana neuron, not an apple neuron? Mm-hmm. That's one of the main questions that I ask.
Interesting. And what attracted you to the work that you're doing now?
So first of all, I think olfaction is one of the most amazing sensation. Like once we smell something, our memory starts thinking about our experiences. It just makes a time travel. So even with that, like I find olfactory system fascinating, and I'm interested in insects in general, and they are using this sensation more than maybe many other organisms.
Hmm.
And they are sophisticated, like bees, ants, and also fruit flies. In my case, they are really good at detecting odors, separating odors, like they're choosing what's a good odor, what's a bad odor. Like they know when to escape from a predator, for example,
Hmm.
when they smell it. So
Hmm.
it's very essential. And since olfactory system of insects and human, there are many, many similarities. So understanding one would really help us understanding the other. That's why I'm working on this topic.
So interesting. I just have to tell you, I remember after my great grandmother passed away, it was probably like a month or two. I was out with my family and we were touring somewhere, and both I smelled wherever we were. I just smelled something that reminded me so much of her house. And I remember saying to my mom, like, that really reminds me, and it was the same thing. She had the same reaction, and I vividly remember that experience. It was really brought us both back, and it was just kind of really comforting in a way. But yeah, it was all about the smell. And so I want to now shift a little bit to your current work on Instagram, and wondering, like, would you consider yourself were you first a scientist and then a photographer, or were you a photographer who then developed a passion for science?
Well, definitely a scientist first.
Mhm.
I must really highlight this because I wouldn't like to offend any professional photographers out there who has like many years of experience and strong background education in that. So I think that would be nice if I just call myself as a real photographer. But also I wouldn't like to be unfair to myself because I have a long university education, a lot of laboratory experience.
Mhm.
So I would call myself a scientist first. And photography is still my hobby that I'm developing and learning day by day.
Very, very cool. Let me ask you, when you're thinking about the photo that you want to post on at Slice of Science, what are the attributes that really make it fascinating to you? Like, make you feel like, okay, this is definitely one that I want to post to my account.
I see. So it's a great question because I have several criteria for that.
Mhm.
First of all, the topic must be interesting. For example, I'm looking at the literature quite often. I'm following a lot of science magazine and also some science accounts on Instagram and other social media. And sometimes I found this great article and I feel like I need to discuss this. I need to communicate this to science
Mhm.
with the society, and
Mhm.
everybody should know this. And then I start digging my photos, and sometimes I found a photo of that animal, that flower, that insect, whatever. And then I'm really happy. So because I can make a connection with my photo,
Mhm.
with the story, and then I post about it. And sometimes, I mean, I do love traveling a lot, and I also spend some time in nature. I do a lot of photos. And when I have a really great photo that I'm proud of, I want to show it to the public, but just putting the photo out there and not talking about it much, I mean, that's not my thing. So I really try to make a story. So I first figure out what's the organism that I'm talking. I look at the recent publications from respected journals. And if I find like satisfying info about it, then I write a small story. And the third criteria is, of course, about the post that I do with my colleagues.
Mhm.
And because I found their projects interesting, or I'm just good friends with them, and then we talk about their project most of the time, and I would like to, really make a contribution in the like, let's say marketing of this project,
Mhm.
so it will reach to more people because I think they really deserve it. So that's the third criteria that I have.
Thanks for giving us that backstory. It's really interesting how you tie that right back in, and that's really interesting to me. And it's not necessarily evident to someone like me who's not following the literature, but seeing that it's really all tied back to that to begin with is just very insightful. Now,
Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. I want to ask you just overall why you decided to get onto Instagram, because I mean, it seems like there are more scientists on Twitter than Instagram these days, but of course a few years ago there weren't as many scientists on Twitter. So I guess my first question for you is why you decided to get onto Instagram, and then looking ahead, do you think Instagram activity among scientists will eventually catch up to, say, Twitter?
Well, since I'm an amateur photographer, and for the development of my photography skills, I would like to share this on Instagram. And it all started with just a basic photography account that I was putting a lot of my travel photos, some animal photos, and so on. And I didn't have this specific purpose of doing science communication over there. Then I've been to this scientific filmmaking competition, which was really, really good. And there I learned how important it is to communicate your own science with the public. And since I was taking a lot of photos, I just decided like, okay, I give it a try. And I made a couple of scientific photos, and the feedback that I got from people were amazing. Seriously, like my old friends, for example, that I haven't spoken for 5 years, 10 years, they were sending me messages like, I really like the story, I think you should do something about that. Like you are good at that. And I was so happy to hear something like this, like you are good at something and people enjoy reading that. So I start putting like a little bit more content on my posts. And after a while, I just realized like, okay, this is working well. Maybe I just carry on. So I deleted all my photos. I changed my name. I collaborated with my friend who is an illustrator. She made an amazing logo for me. And then I become Slice of Science.
Right.
And since then, I'm very happy with my account.
I like that logo, by the way. I noticed it right away. Let me ask you, so the second part of that, which is, this idea of Twitter versus Instagram as far as activity by scientists.
Yeah, so I think both platforms are really good and useful. I've seen many professors are on Twitter, but it wasn't the case like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, something like that. And it become really quite popular in academia now. Every lab should have a Twitter, and then they discuss science. But still, I find the communication on Twitter a little bit more, elite. So it's still inside the academic bubble. But when we move to Instagram, we reach to everyone. Like I always give this example, like my mother doesn't have Twitter, and but she has Instagram, and she follows me on Instagram. Everyone has Instagram. All university students have Instagram, for example. So I think because of that, I just found Instagram more reachable, and it's more visual also. As a photographer, I think it's great to communicate your science and work through your photos on this platform. And so it's hard to guess which platform is gonna win, but I can definitely see more and more people are being active on Instagram. They start opening accounts and they start communicating science over Instagram. And I mean, this popularity is increasing. And as we initially talked, there's another platform that I'm not yet there. It's TikTok. And I also seen some other great scientists, like maybe in 2 years, 3 years, that will be the most efficient way of communicating science, not Instagram. But for me now, I think Instagram is doing really great.
Yeah, perfect. And, I, as listeners know, I interviewed Dr. Austin Lee Chang, who is all over TikTok and is really followed by a lot of folks, and he does an amazing job explaining the work that he does, as well as science and medical issues more generally through TikTok. I mentioned in the intro that one of your goals, Khan, is to show scientists as everyday accessible people. And just wondering if you could share, why is that important to you?
I think it's really, really important because scientists should gain trust of the public. And in order to do that, we have to show them we are no different than them. Because, I mean, we are all people, but I mean, being a scientist, of course, you have to be passionate about science. Of course, it's difficult. But I think everyone could be a scientist. It's not like there's this idea of separating scientists from the public because if you go 200 years ago, only rich people, like people coming from rich families, they were doing science. But now anyone can do it. And I mean, first of all, it's very important for public to know that we are normal people. We are not necessarily just geeks. We have hobbies. We are not wearing a lab coat all the time. There are these like stereotypes that I would like to break and show that we are just all one. And I think because of that, like once we reach to that point, instead of politicians or instead of some singers or whatever, people will start respecting scientists. They will start loving scientists on social media. Maybe scientists will be the superstars of the future, not the movie stars, but because of that, I think really we have to reach to public and show that we are in the same level.
Mm-hmm. I like you use the word trust, and I think that is such an important aspect of this. That the public, is more likely to trust the expertise or the findings of scientists if they relate to the scientists. And of course, that's what your focus has been: is to make scientists more relatable to the public.
Yes, but I also have a comment on that. Like, it's not just my effort or some others to try to show it like we are equal. It's also, a responsibility of scientists to do that. They shouldn't really see themselves as different, or they shouldn't think that they are smarter than other people in general. They should be more accessible. So they should be on this social media, on these platforms, basically, and they should talk about their science, not only inside the journals that only scientists are reading. They should actively engage with the society, so that this way society will appreciate, and then of course, like, this connection will be established.
Right, absolutely, 100% agree. I'm wondering, Khan, if your perspective as a photographer ever influences your scientific work.
So I think it's the opposite. Like, as a scientist, I think I have a different perspective when I take my photos, especially when I take photos of wildlife or insects when I'm outside.
Right.
I sometimes I already know the story that I want to tell. I know the insect when I see it, and I want to talk about it. So I need to show it from an angle that that is obvious for the reader. So if it is, if I'm going to talk about one specific behavior, then I will try to find the angle that's best show that sort of behavior. So in that sense, I think science is influencing my photography. But I would also say photography is influencing my science a bit, because since I'm taking photos of things quite often, I could definitely say that I'm doing more broad research. Like, now I'm reading about chimpanzees, I'm reading about seals, I'm reading about ants. I'm working with Drosophila, like I'm working with olfactory system, but I read other things. And it's because of photography.
Sure. And, that is so interesting to me, because you may find connections that are not obvious, that maybe you wouldn't have even looked for, that could really advance your science, because you're doing this reading that is not necessarily in your specific lane, if you will.
That's so true. Yes.
Really cool. So I wonder, as we wrap up here, if you could share the backstory maybe of one of your favorite photos, how you were able to capture it, what surprised you, maybe, like, were you scared? I mean, I saw the hippo photos, and as you pointed out, like, those are can be very dangerous animals, as you noted, and you got a good shots of their teeth too. So I'm just wondering if you have any stories that can about how you captured these photos.
Sure. I mean, the hippos are extremely dangerous animals, and then when people are more afraid of lions and so on. But when you do a safari, that's like the first thing that you learn. Like, don't piss off a hippo; they're really dangerous. But I mean, that's not my favorite photo, although I like it. My favorite photo is the chimpanzee photo that I got in Uganda.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is you have to do some hike to reach those chimpanzees, and sometimes, I mean, it's possible that you don't see anything, and then I was so excited first to hear that they were screaming in the jungle. Then we start looking at the trees, some branches were shaking, and then they were kicking the trees, and we found one. Like, we start chasing it, and then we chased it, and he wasn't aggressive. He knew that we were chasing him, but I mean, at some point he just like sit down. He was laying like over a tree, like he laid down over the tree, and then he started observing me. And normally when I see an animal outside, I just set my camera and then I start shooting like crazy. But there I was very lucky. Like the settings of my camera was all done, and I think I've taken like 2-3 shots, and they were really good enough. But I really enjoyed the moment, like watching the chimpanzee staring at me, not in an aggressive way. He was also observing me, and I just like stayed there, and I was like just looking at him. And I mean, I cannot forget that moment. Now, each time I look at that photo, like it really triggers good memories, and I will never forget that moment.
That is so cool. So in a way, sort of, the chimpanzee was taking mental photos of you.
Exactly. We were both doing that actually, because I could have been, unlucky, and maybe I would have a flu photo on my camera. But I mean, that moment for me, the photography was not that important, like I was like, I should really enjoy this moment, and I should just like adore this animal in the wild.
So cool. This has been a great conversation, Kaan, Mika. You just bringing to life science and your experiences in a way that very few people are doing. And I really appreciate you, first of all, doing the research that you are, and on top of that, really making so much accessible to the average person. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for being with us here today.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me here. It was such a great pleasure to have this chat with you. I really enjoyed it.
Listeners, thank you for joining us as well. And I hope you'll be back next time for another episode of When Science Speaks.
This is When Science Speaks, a new web series profiling innovative and interesting people working in science and technical fields, from academia to industry to the nonprofit world. We explore how to be a powerhouse advocate for science and your research, how to advance your career in meaningful ways that make you happy, and how to push back on the ongoing assault on science and other related issues of interest happening in the world.